I think gaming today is as amazing as it has ever been, but I do think there is one particular thing that we had a lot more of in gaming back in the day, and that is the ability to try before you buy. Now I know that sometimes we do get game demos available for us through our consoles or on our computers through Steam, but there was a time where you could almost go to random places and through those random places be able to play video games, whether they were kiosks, demo setups, or special events, some kind of way back in the day to be able to play video games to get us excited to want to go spend the money to buy them and have them at home. I mean, there was a time you could go to McDonald's and there was video games there to play. Talk about a play place. So I thought I would take this time to talk about some personal experiences of my own. Some times that I was able to play retro video games and consoles before actually owning them, or in some cases, never owning them. I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us kid.
Toys R Us has the world's biggest selection of Nintendo games and accessories.
If you wanted to play video games, Toys R Us was like a freaking theme park. You would just go straight into the World of Nintendo section, and there would be a kiosk there where you could just play a video game before ever even dropping $1 down on a game yourself. I played Nintendo there, Super Nintendo there, Sega Genesis there, TurboGrafx 16 I believe I played at a Toys R Us. They even sometimes had Game Boy kiosks where they would have a Game Boy attached to like a giant screen. It was basically like a Super Game Boy prototype. It was like going to the arcade. You would literally be waiting in line to just wait for your turn on the kiosk because you knew that you could at least play a game for about 5 or 10 minutes before it reset. Now, the only thing is you couldn't play every game. They would only have whatever game they had available in those kiosks, but it was still nice. It was still fun. There are some games that I was able to be introduced to for the first time thanks to the Toys R Us kiosk.
The first and only game powered by the Super FX microchip.
Star Fox, that's the first time I saw Star Fox, was in Toys R Us. I actually was able to play it. Sonic the Hedgehog, I have Toys R Us to thank for introducing me to Sonic the Hedgehog, or specifically Sonic the Hedgehog 2. There was always a Sonic 2 kiosk ready to go at a Toys R Us when Genesis was out. Toys R Us was even the first place where I got to play the Virtual Boy. They actually had a Virtual Boy kiosk. I remember playing that game Red Alarm on there. Red Alarm. And then eventually they changed Red Alarm to Wario Land, and then eventually they stopped trying to sell a Virtual Boy. I don't know how we all did not get eye diseases trying to use the same Virtual Boy in a Toys R Us. But Toys R Us wasn't the only place to find these kiosks. I also remember seeing one in Sears. I even remember there was one in Service Merchandise. Do you even know what that is? I know that Toys R Us went away and is now supposedly coming back in a Macy's. So Jeffrey Giraffe, what's the deal? Give me a video game kiosk in your Macy's Toys R Us right now, or you're not really back.
So now you can breathe Nintendo, love Nintendo, be Nintendo at Toys R Us.
In order to play a video game console back in the day, especially the Nintendo Entertainment System, look no further than every friend and cousin's house you know. I feel like every friend I had and every cousin that I had that I went to their place, they had a Nintendo before I did. Super Mario Brothers, played at someone's house for the first time. Duck Hunt, played at someone's house for the first time. Legend of Zelda, someone's house for the first time. Karate Champ, someone's house for the first time. I feel like I was this close to almost beating Super Mario Brothers before having it on my own because I played it so many times at other people's houses. And every single time I would go to somebody's house to play Nintendo, I would come home and be like, Mom, Dad, can I have my own Nintendo, please? And they'd be like, you got Nintendo money? You had that cousin that you want to get in a fight with, but you didn't because you knew if you got on his bad side, no Nintendo for you. So, best cousin ever. And of course, you always had that one kid in the neighborhood that had every single Nintendo game, Rob the Robot and everything. And even if the kid was a brat, you had to be like, look, I gotta be buddies with him. I'm sorry. Even if he is a jerk. Yeah, I'll get you some ice cream. Yeah, you can play with my toys because I just want to play on Nintendo. This is a bad economic system. This is the first time as a young person that I understood the class system in the United States. It was hard out here in these Nintendo streets, man. But of course, eventually, one beautiful Christmas morning, there was a Nintendo Entertainment System under my tree, and I didn't have to be a kiss butt to anybody else in the world because now Nintendo was mine. Kiss butt to me. A friend's house was also good during the Super Nintendo Sega Genesis wars. So what you would do is you would have one console and then you make friends with someone who had the other console and then you go over to each other's house and play the different consoles. I was a Super Nintendo house, so I would go to a Genesis house and be like, what's up? Can I get some of that Sonic? Same thing when PlayStation came out. I had a Nintendo 64 and a GameCube, so I had to go to the PlayStation places to play the PlayStations. at their places. That's how friendship worked back in the day. I think this could be a lesson in diversity. If Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo people can come together into each other's homes and be friends, then can't we all? I believe the consoles are the future. Teach them well and let them play the games. So I figured some of you are going to be doing some traveling over the summer, so I thought I would give you a couple of travel tips powered by Bose. These are the Bose Quiet Comfort Earbuds 2, and I love them. I use them all the time. Bluetooth connection to your iPhone, your iPad, your Android, with all the sounds coming in here, while drowning out some of the sounds coming out of there. These are definitely great to bring with you on a plane, on a train. This is the set that I use right here. I went to the airport, and the airport, as you know, just has a bunch of noises going on. These earbuds have some great noise canceling technology. They have a mode called quiet mode. You turn that on, and even though you'll be able to hear some things because you always want to be aware of your surroundings, it definitely takes out a lot of the louder sounds around you, so you can be focused on the music or the game sounds that you're hearing right in your ears wearing these earbuds, which, given how much anxiety travel can bring, is very helpful. The Bose Music app also allows you to adjust your EQ settings, such as your bass, your mid-range, your treble. It has simple touch controls, and if you want to, you can even listen through one earbud. And I know that sun is beaming hot out there, so these things have moisture resistance. You got that sweat, they should be okay. You can check them out at Bose.com. They even come in different colors. So if you're traveling and want to hear some good sounds as well as cancel out some noise, I highly recommend bringing along the Bose Quiet Comfort Earbuds 2. The Play Choice 10 is the simplest idea that seemed like the most marvelous idea in the world. Let's just put a Nintendo out in public for people to play for a couple minutes, and they pay us for it. So if you don't know what the Play Choice 10 was, it was the special Nintendo system that they would have that would have 10 Nintendo games on it. You put a quarter in it, and they would give you a certain amount of time that you could just play whatever Nintendo games are in there. You could play just one game, or you could even reset and play multiple games as long as you did it within that time limit that your quarter allowed you. So this was a way to be able to preview certain Nintendo games before you buy them. There were even times where they would have Nintendo games in a Play Choice 10 before they even had them out in stores, like with Super Mario Bros. 3. That's how I actually played Super Mario 3 for the first time, was through a Play Choice 10 before you could even buy it. There was like a Super Play Choice that did Super Nintendo games. They would have Play Choice 10 sometimes in arcades, but where I usually saw Play Choice 10 was in Pizza Hut, making it great because we could go to Pizza Hut, get a table, order a pizza, and while that pizza was being made and we had to wait for it, I could get on that Play Choice 10 and play me some Mario or some Double Dragon. That was what was so fun, was every Play Choice 10, you never knew which 10 games you're gonna get because sometimes people would update them right away, sometimes they wouldn't, so you just didn't know what was gonna be in there. Even when I had my own Nintendo at home, I still found myself gravitated towards the Play Choice 10 because maybe they had games I didn't have in there, or maybe it was just kind of fun to be able to play Nintendo out in public, almost like an arcade. What a novel concept. All right, this is for my PC gamers out there. Has anyone ever played a video game in a Radio Shack?
From affordable family computers to exciting multimedia PCs, Radio Shack has the selection you want.
Anytime I would go to the mall, I would always stop by Radio Shack, and they would always have right up front, right when you walked in, a display of computers that will always have a video game on them that you could play to try out their computers.
This easy-to-use home organizer computer system with hard drive and color monitor, only $899.95.
It would always be like a AST Advantage or a Tandy. But hey, they could play games, right? And for some reason, they would always have one of three games. They would either have Prince of Persia, Myst, or The Seventh Guest. They always had The Seventh Guest. If you went into a Radio Shack with a computer on display and it didn't have The Seventh Guest, then you are not in a Radio Shack. I'm sorry. You might be in a Circuit City, my friend.
Now save better at Radio Shack, America's technology store.
And even though I never had any of these computers in my home, I always felt the need to stop by Radio Shack to check out these games. Prince of Persia, Myst, Seventh Guest. Was there any other game they ever had on those things? I think the reason why it never got me into wanting to buy them is because we also had computers at school. So I kind of looked at those PCs as school, even if they had games on it. And besides, I'm sorry, no offense to Myst or Seventh Guest or Prince of Persia, but I liked Oregon Trail and Carmen Sandiego and Number Munchers. Does anyone remember Number Munchers? Now I'm just adding school on this. School is also where I play video games, thanks to the Apple IIe and the early Macs. Thank you, Number Munchers, for helping me with math. Thank you, Reader Rabbit. And that game where you were a fish and you had to decide if you want to try to eat a bigger fish or run away. Whatever that game was, I played that too.
Get real. We'd rather be playing video games. You can rent them from Blockbuster.
Of course, you could rent video games from Blockbuster and Hollywood Video, but there was a time where Blockbuster Video and Hollywood Video, you could actually rent game consoles from them. You could rent a Super Nintendo, N64, GameCube, you could rent a PlayStation, Genesis, a Saturn, a Dreamcast. You could even at one time rent the Virtual Boy. Again, a bunch of people using the same Virtual Boy. How do we still have eyes? They always came in those giant suitcases, you know what I'm talking about? Like they always look like you were carrying around some government secrets or something like that. Like you trying to do a drug deal, but it's with a game console. It's always in these big giant cases. You got the stuff. You got that Sega Saturn, son. Freaking glowing when you open it like, oh! They were pretty pricey, and I think you had to put like a big deposit down. Can't imagine what the late fee must have been on those. But if you wanted to try a new game system before buying it, this was the way to do it. You could rent the console, rent the game. Definitely cheaper than buying the console itself, as long as you brought it back. As long as you were able to bring it back just in good enough quality as it was when it left, you were fine. But if that thing broke in any kind of way when you brought it back, then you should have just bought the console, my friend. Some reason they stopped doing it. I can't imagine why game consoles would be upset at Blockbuster or Hollywood Video for letting people rent out game consoles before buying them. And if you were really lucky, you would go to a Blockbuster or a Hollywood when they were like trying to clean out the inventory, and sometimes those consoles they used to rent, they would sell them super cheap. Could you imagine if you rented a game console from a Blockbuster and then it closed? And you were just like, well, guess they don't need this anymore. Now this next experience is personal for me, but I want to tell people about it just in case anyone else ever did this as well. I know that sometimes there will be special events in special locations to be able to play video games for the first time. So I remember back in the day, I randomly took a trip to Los Angeles, California, and there was this huge tent that was there, and I walked inside of it, and that is where I was able to play for the first time the Xbox, the original Xbox. It was some special Xbox event that they were having where you could play this console there. And I know I played a number of different games there, but the only game that I can remember playing is this game called Cell Damage. It was basically like Twisted Metal, but with cartoon characters. I think that's probably why I played it, because I was a big cartoon fan. So I was like, ooh, a cartoon video game. Look at these graphics. I've never seen anything like this from my Nintendo days. Here I am inside of a tent going, I'm playing video games. Andre, you can do that at home. You're at the beach in LA. And I'm sitting here like, video games, yay, we fun. For some reason, that's what I remember. I just remember going here and being like, oh, hey, there's an Xbox thing. I guess that was my first E3. And the sad part is I never got an Xbox. It didn't work. I played other people's Xboxes, and I eventually got an Xbox 360, but OG Xbox, nah, man, I was a GameCube boy for life. The absolute coolest place for me to be able to play any video game before it came out was from a special land called Funko Land. Does anyone remember Funko Land? Not to be confused with Funko Land, meaning like anytime you go to a convention and half the vendors are just showing giant walls of Funko Pops. Not the same Funko Land. Funko Land with a C, not a K. Now, I don't know if this was the case at Babbage's or Electronics Boutique, but at the Funko Land that I used to go to, they would have a lot of used copies of video games. So as long as a video game had a used copy or a demo copy in stock, we were able to try any video game out because they had all the different consoles set up. It was amazing.
This is how most stores feel about letting you try their video games. This is how we feel. Funko Land. Game
Boy Advance, I think the first time I ever played that was at a Funko Land. They had Super Mario Advance on display. I'll never forget this experience of going to a Funko Land and they introduced me to Grand Theft Auto 3. The guy that was working there that day was just like, I gotta show you this game, man. You gotta try it out. They weren't supposed to do it because one of the rules was they weren't supposed to allow mature rated games to be played in public, but there was no one else in the store, so they let me do it. And we're sitting around driving cars, hitting grandmas and whatever. And then right when we were about to get really into the game, do some crazy stuff, I think a mom and a kid walked in, or some family walked in, and one of the Funko Land employees was like, turn it off, turn it off, turn it off. The Funko Land I went to even had a GameCube launch party. I was able to go there at midnight and get my GameCube and bring it home. Got me some Luigi's Mansion and some Tony Hawk Pro Skater, I think. It was a glorious time. Everyone else going to the club. I'm going to the Funko Land to get me my GameCube. But then eventually, like Babbage's and Electronics Boutique, Funko Land was taken over by GameStop, and it was not what it used to be. Other lands exist still, but not Funko Land, and I miss it so. Probably because I still have a few Funko bucks I never used. This land is your land. This land is my land. This land is Funko Land for you and me. I can play any video games as long as they have one used, 'cause that's the Funko Land guarantee.